It was a cold evening when 5 friends decided to take a different path home. The road was quiet, swallowed by tall trees, and at the very end stood a house that looked older than time itself. Its wooden structure leaned slightly to one side, the windows were shattered, and vines crawled across the walls like veins. "People say no one has lived here for over 50 years, whispered Arjun, the most curious of the group. His voice trembled with both fear and excitement. The others laughed nervously. "It's just a house," Maya said, though her eyes lingered on the broken door that swayed with the wind. The group entered, their footsteps echoing across dusty floors. The air was thick, almost choking, filled with the smell of rotten mold. Spiderwebs dangled like curtains, and every corner seemed darker than it should be. In the living room, they found old furniture covered with white sheets, as if the owners had left in a hurry. A clock on the wall ticked faintly, though its hands had frozen at midnight. Strange, no one could explain why it still made a sound. As they moved deeper, a strange coldness surrounded them. The temperature dropped suddenly, forcing them to shiver. "Did you feel that?" Samir asked, rubbing his arms. Nobody answered, but everyone felt it. On the second floor, they discovered a child's bedroom. Toys were scattered across the floor, untouched and dusty. A small music box rested on the shelf. When Maya picked it up, it began to play by itself. A soft lullaby filled the air, but the sound was twisted, broken, almost like a whisper calling their names. Arjun's face went pale. "We should leave." But before they could, the door behind them slammed shut with a force that shook the entire room. The friends froze. The forgotten house had awakened. That night, the group decided to stay together inside the living room. Fear lingered in their eyes, but none of them admitted it aloud. The broken clock continued ticking faintly, echoing in the silence. As they tried to rest, faint whispers began to crawl through the walls. At first, they thought it was the wind, but the whispers grew louder, clearer, forming words. Someone or something was speaking to them. Maya pressed her ear against the cracked wallpaper. Her eyes widened. "It's saying our names." The whispers multiplied, as if dozens of voices surrounded them, circling closer and closer. Samir grabbed a flashlight, pointing it toward the hallway. For a split second, the beam caught a shadow moving too fast, too tall to be human. The whispers turned into scratching sounds. The walls trembled as if something was trapped inside, desperate to get out. Suddenly, the floor creaked behind them. They turned, only to find nothing. Yet the air was thick with a presence they could not see. Arjun's hands shook. "This house doesn't want us here." Suddenly, the old mirror in the corner cracked without being touched. A scream echoed, not from their mouths, but from inside the walls. It was high-pitched, filled with agony, like a soul being torn apart. The group huddled together, their breath shallow, hearts racing. The whispers stopped for a moment, replaced by silence so heavy it pressed against their chests. Then, in the silence, a single voice whispered behind them, clear, sharp, and filled with hatred. "You shouldn't have come." They turned around, but the room was empty. The cracked mirror in the corner seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Though it was old and dusty, the glass reflected with unnatural clarity, as if it didn't belong in this world. Maya stepped closer, her curiosity stronger than her fear. She wiped the surface with her sleeve, and for a moment, she froze. Her reflection did not move with her. Instead, the figure inside the mirror smiled while Maya's lips stayed still. The group gasped, stumbling backward. The reflection slowly tilted its head, and its eyes glowed faintly red. "Stop looking at it!" Arjun shouted, pulling Maya back. But the damage was already done. The mirror began to shimmer, showing flashes of things that were not in the room: blood-stained walls, figures hanging from the ceiling, and a child with hollow black eyes staring directly at them. Samir tried to smash it with a chair, but as the chair struck the glass, the reflection reached out from inside, catching the chair with an inhuman grip. The group screamed as the mirror rippled like water. For a terrifying moment, they saw themselves inside it, not as they were now, but dead, pale, and twisted, their eyes gouged out, their mouths open in silent screams. Maya covered her face, trembling. "It's showing us our deaths." The whispers from the walls returned, now louder, laughing, mocking. The mirror began to vibrate, and tiny cracks spread across the surface, releasing a low growl. Suddenly, the glass shattered outward, shards flying across the room. But instead of falling, the shards hovered in the air, each piece reflecting a different nightmare: fires, graves, rotting corpses, and their own faces distorted beyond recognition. The pieces swirled violently before crashing to the floor, disappearing into nothingness. The mirror's frame remained empty, like a black hole sucking in the light around it. From the darkness within the frame, a hand began to emerge, long, pale, with nails like claws. The house was no longer just haunted. Something inside it was waking up. Shaken and terrified, the friends decided to escape, but every door they tried was locked, sealed by an unseen force. The house had trapped them. Desperate, they searched for another way out, only to stumble upon a door they hadn't seen before. It stood at the end of a narrow hallway, covered in dust, as if hidden for decades. None of them remembered passing it earlier. Against his better judgment, Arjun pushed it open. The hinges screeched like a dying animal, and the smell of iron and decay flooded out. Inside was a room that shouldn't exist. It was not part of the house's layout. The walls were painted with strange symbols, circles filled with writing in a language no one could understand. Candles stood melted into pools of wax on the floor, though none were lit. In the center of the room lay a wooden chair, bound with thick ropes, stained dark with old blood. Maya's voice trembled. This was some kind of ritual. As they stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind them. The temperature dropped instantly, and the air grew heavy. The symbols on the walls began to glow faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Samir shined the flashlight around, only for the beam to flicker and die. The room plunged into darkness. Then, slowly, words began to appear on the walls, written in fresh red, dripping like blood. They spelled, "Offer what is mine." Suddenly, the chair creaked as if someone invisible had sat down on it. The ropes tightened around nothingness, as if binding a shape they couldn't see. A whisper filled the room, louder than ever, vibrating through their bones. The walls bled, and the floor shook violently. They scrambled toward the door, but it wouldn't open. The house roared with fury. And then, in the corner, a figure appeared, a shadow, tall and hollow-eyed, slowly turning its head toward them. The room that shouldn't exist had been waiting. The group stumbled out of the strange ritual room, their faces pale, their breaths sharp and uneven. Fear clung to them like a second skin. The hallway stretched endlessly, darker than before, as though the house had shifted into another shape. "We need to stay together," Arjun whispered, gripping Maya's hand tightly. Samir walked ahead, flashlight trembling in his grasp. The light flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. For a moment, those shadows seemed to move on their own, stretching unnaturally. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the corridor, though no windows were open. The air grew heavy, and a low hum rattled in their ears. "Do you hear that?" Samir asked, stopping in his tracks. Before anyone could answer, the flashlight beam fell upon a figure at the end of the hall. A child, small, barefoot, its head lowered. "Hello?" Samir called out, his voice shaky. The child lifted its face. Its eyes were hollow black pits. The lights died. Darkness swallowed them whole. Panic erupted. They clung to each other, trying to move back, but in the chaos, one of them, Rohit, screamed. His voice tore through the dark, echoing with terror. "Rohit! Where are you?" Maya shouted, but there was no answer. The darkness lifted slowly, like a curtain being pulled back, and when their eyes adjusted, Rohit was gone. Only his shoes remained, lying neatly on the floor, as though he had stepped out of them. The group searched frantically, opening every door, shouting his name, but the house stayed silent. The whispers returned, mocking, laughing. On the wall, words appeared in blood-red letters. "One is mine." Maya burst into tears. Arjun held her tightly, but his own body trembled. Samir backed into a corner, his eyes darting around. "It's picking us off. One by one." The floorboards beneath them groaned, as if something moved underneath. A faint dragging sound echoed below. Samir dropped the flashlight by accident. As it rolled across the floor, its beam briefly revealed something horrifying. Rohit's pale face pressed against the floorboards from beneath, mouth open wide in a silent scream, before vanishing again. The group froze, paralyzed with terror. Rohit wasn't missing. He had been taken. The air in the house shifted, heavy with something ancient and furious. The whispers had grown into voices, layered upon one another, chanting in a language none of them understood. Arjun grabbed Maya and Samir, dragging them down the hall. "We need to end this. There has to be a way." They ran into the main hall again, where the broken mirror frame still stood like a black doorway. Its emptiness throbbed, pulling them closer, as if it were alive. The shadows in the house began to gather around it, crawling up the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes. Suddenly, the front door, their last hope, opened by itself. For a brief second, freedom lay before them. They rushed toward it, but before they could reach, the door slammed shut so violently the glass shattered, shards scattering across the floor. The voices grew deafening. The ground trembled. From the mirror's black frame, the pale hand they had seen earlier forced itself out completely, followed by the figure of a woman. Her face was gaunt, her mouth stretched too wide, her eyes hollow but glowing with fire. Her body was wrapped in old burial cloths stained with soil and blood. "It's her," Maya whispered, tears streaming. "The one they cursed." The woman stepped into the hall, every movement jerky, unnatural, as though her body didn't belong to her. Her voice was 1,000 voices together as she shrieked. "You owe me blood." The walls bled, dripping red. The furniture flew across the room. The candles from the ritual room lit themselves, burning with black flames. Samir tried to run, but the spirit's shadow stretched, snatching him by the throat. He screamed as his body was slammed against the wall, his eyes rolling back. Arjun tried to pull him away, but it was useless. The shadow consumed him, leaving nothing but ash. Maya fell to her knees, sobbing. "Please, let us go." The spirit turned its hollow eyes toward her. For a brief second, silence fell. Then, with a terrifying calm, it whispered, "Burn it." Arjun realized what it meant. The house itself, the cursed ground, was the prison and the key. If they didn't destroy it, the curse would claim them all. With shaking hands, he grabbed a lantern from the dusty shelf, smashing it against the floor. Flames erupted, spreading across the dry wood. The spirit screamed, a sound that shattered every window in the house. As fire consumed the walls, the shadows thrashed violently, the house shaking as though alive. Arjun and Maya held each other, forcing themselves toward the burning doorway. The air was thick with smoke, but for the first time, a glimpse of dawn shone through the cracks. They leapt through the flames, collapsing onto the ground outside as the house roared behind them, engulfed in fire. But just before the roof collapsed, one last whisper escaped from within, carried by the wind.